The British Empire didn't collapse with a bang. It collapsed with a miscalculation. A moment where pride ran faster than reality, and the world finally caught up. This wasn't about losing a battle. It was about losing control of history itself. And once this mistake was made, there was no undo button, no empire reboot, no second chance. This is the story of how Britain played its last big hand on the world stage and lost. Welcome to the scars of a global stormfronts. By the end of World War II, Britain was standing, but barely. Cities were bombed. The economy was drowning in debt. Millions of soldiers were coming home to a country running on ration cards and hope. On paper, Britain was still a global power. In reality, it was living on borrowed strength. The empire stretched across the map, but holding it together was costing more than it could afford. India was already gone. Other colonies were restless. And yet British leadership still believed one thing above all else, that the world still needed Britain to be in charge. That belief would become fatal. One place mattered more than any other, the route between Europe and Asia, the shortcut that powered global trade, oil shipments and military movement. Control over that passage meant influence over half the planet's economy. Losing it would mean accepting a painful truth, that Britain was no longer the boss, and Britain was not ready to accept that. When control of that strategic route slipped out of British hands, it wasn't treated as diplomacy. It was treated as an insult, a challenge, a direct attack on imperial authority. Instead of adapting to a changing world, Britain doubled down on old habits, secret plans, backroom deals, military pressure, the same empire playbook that had worked for generations. There was just one problem. The world after World War II didn't work that way anymore. Two new giants now ran the global game. One in Washington, one in Moscow, and neither had any interest in watching old empires bully their way through international politics. Britain assumed allies would fall in line. They didn't. The United States saw instability. The Soviet Union saw opportunity. And suddenly Britain found itself isolated, exposed and diplomatically cornered. The empire tried to act like a superpower. The world treated it like a middle power playing dress-up. Here's the brutal truth. Britain could no longer afford to be an empire. War debt from World War II was crushing. The national currency was fragile. Foreign reserves were thin. One economic shock could bring the entire system down, and that shock came fast. International pressure turned financial support into a weapon. Credit lines tightened, currency confidence collapsed, and within days, Britain was staring at economic disaster. No soldiers could fix that, no navy could block that. Money had replaced muscle as the ultimate weapon. What followed wasn't just a withdrawal, it was humiliation on a global scale. British forces pulled back not because they were defeated on the battlefield, but because the economy couldn't survive the standoff. For the first time in centuries, Britain was forced to stop because someone else said so. That moment echoed around the world. Colonies heard it loud and clear. The empire could be challenged, and it could be beaten. After that mistake, well, the collapse really accelerated. Independence movements gained confidence, you know. Former colonies pushed harder, and Britain simply no longer had the leverage to stop them. This wasn't just the end of control over territory. No, it was the end of imperial authority. as a concept. Britain shifted from ruler to partner, from commander to negotiator. The empire didn't just fade away, it cracked, and once cracked, it shattered fast. Empires don't die when they lose wars. They die when they misread the world. Britain's final mistake was believing the rules of the past still applied in a post-World War II reality. The age of empires was over. The age of economics, alliances and global opinion had begun. Britain stepped into the future using yesterday's map and paid the price. This story isn't just about Britain. It's about power, about arrogance, about what happens when leaders confuse legacy with relevance. The biggest danger to any power isn't enemies, it's denial. When you refuse to see change, change doesn't ask permission. It runs you over. Modern nations still fall into the same trap, overestimating strength, ignoring economics, believing reputation alone can carry influence. History doesn't whisper these lessons, it shouts them. And the British Empire's final mistake is one of the loudest warnings ever recorded. If you want more deep, unapologetic history that cuts through the noise and exposes the real scars left by global conflict, make sure you subscribe to The Scars of a Global Storm Fronts. Share this with someone who thinks empires fall slowly. And remember, history doesn't forgive complacency.